Perfect. The lady has spoken. So right now I would like to invite our elder and Rose Harvey to provide us with a opening prayer and song. And if possible, and if you're able to, please do stand and listen to our elder with her opening welcome.
Ngleo shokwathan. Data show niga konis chish aganzanu. Dadunana shothan uganita. Kaner ju shothan uganita. Shothan kuganta juga ketel kunji. Ngetsatli dikan cow. That's un nanji ngetsatli do. Konis chish kudatlan ju. I just want to translate what I just said, and I thank you, Lord, for Jesus, for this new day. Take good care of our children. Watch over everybody. Watch over us everywhere we go. We love you, Great Spirit. Help us to love one another, and thank you for everything. I'd like to also share a song with you. Is that okay? The song that I learned from my mother, Irene Smith. And it goes like this. Ntleo danina, ntleo danina, nan. How did that happen? Sorry. Did I get blocked off there?
I think you got muted for a second. Would you be able to sing it again?
Yeah, I can do it again. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Ntleo danina, ntleo danina, nanka kudane. Good morning, Danina. Good morning, Danina. Nanka kudane. Good morning. This whole world people say good morning to you. Ntleo Danina. Ntleo Danina. Nanka kudane. Klakun. Kunchish.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Hey, let me share screen again. Go. Great. Thank you. It was wonderful. A wonderful opening to our session. Let's move on to housekeeping. Woo! So just for people who are starting to get used to Zoom, as our world is now turning cybernetics, and we've got to get used to not being meeting people in the flesh. I thought maybe we should do a little bit of housekeeping to figure out how to use Zoom. So I want to make sure that your Zoom name does show your preferred first and last name, so I can find you and say your names, especially if you're a speaker. If you're using a mobile, you can click on participants and find your name, and then if you right click, you can then select how to rename yourself. It's a little same with the desktop version. And then you want to make sure that we keep our videos and microphone muted. Oops. If I can get that back. And you can find that either at the top left or top right of your Zoom toolbar. You may raise your hand to speak and unmute yourself when I can prompt you. It's just so we don't get a double voices and many people speaking at the same time. It's difficult to hear when it's on Zoom, which is very different from in person. I do ask that if you are speaking to make sure that you that the other person who's speaking finishes speaking first before you speak, because it does get cut off and microphones can't pick up many people at the same time, which is very different from how a human ear functions. Unfortunately, technology is great, but not that great at the moment in the present. All right, next, because we aren't in person, I am unable to see all of your lovely faces. I can't interact with everybody the same way as I, and I can't hear your nonverbal cues. So if you could use the reaction button found in your Zoom toolbar, either at the top of your screen or at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You may bombard us with a bunch of reactions, you know, applaud, thumbs up, raise your hand if you want to say something, or you can use the chat box to send us messages as well. We'll be monitoring the chat box. So yeah, thanks. I love reactions. It gives me a sort of, feels like I'm interacting with our audiences a bit more, and feels like you're here with us in person. I can't see your smiles, so it'd be great if I can see your emoji reactions instead. So next, I want to please point out that we want to make sure that we are practicing respectful behaviors and mindful spaces in our languages. Make sure this is a safe space for everybody to speak their minds. And that when you are using your group chat, that you are making sure that you are sending your messages to the correct person or to everyone in the meeting. So you want to make sure that you're not saying, wow, what a boring meeting to everybody when you're trying to just say it to one person. That would be very embarrassing. And then finally, as we can see, our summit is being recorded and we'll be able to share it after the summit, however long uploading in the Yukon takes. We'll try to share it as soon as possible. The recording only records people with who are speaking, who are pinned as speaker, and who are have their video on. So if you do have your video on, you might get recorded. If you do not want to be recorded, please keep your video off when speaking, or if you feel uncomfortable with the recording, you may leave the meeting at any time. We'll have no judgments at all. Yes, so that is our housekeeping. I just want to give a little introduction of our summit to everybody. We've done our summit. This is our third summit. We had our first summit around 2017, 2018, a really large one in person. It was absolutely wonderful. We had people from the communities and we got to network and meet, and we had great food. Our second summit in 2019 was also great, and we got even better food at that mini summit. We just thought we just had to do it again, you know, and especially during this time where there's just so many things happening in the world. We should get together, even if we can't get together in person, which we were hoping to be able to do a hybrid, but a non-hybrid full virtual Zoom, if that's what we can hold, we'll do it. And with our registration, I can see that we are inviting speakers and participants from beyond just Yukon, which is exciting as well. Sharing our stories in the Yukon to the rest of Canada, or as however far our participants are. And I think if you guys have noticed that we have had a partnership with the Archives Association of
Archivist Association of British Columbia.
Archivist Association of British Columbia, ABC, earlier in the year, last year in October and November, and we got a lot of great messages from our participants saying how much they want to hear more about the Yukon and how much they're excited about hearing our Yukon speakers speak about their stories. And I thought this was a great opportunity to be able to do that again and share more Yukon stories with our members and from interested people and our archives field and colleagues. And as a place to network and feel connected again, despite not being able to see each other in person. What else can I say? I guess actually I can introduce our organization, the Yukon Council of Archives. We've been running since 1986, a long time. I started as the community archivist around 4.5 years ago, and it's been an exciting time. I've been traveling around the Yukon, visiting all our communities and seeing everybody in person when it was still possible. I unfortunately haven't been able to do that in the past 2 years now. Gosh, COVID. But despite that, we did what we can with a lot of phone, Zoom combos to do site visits and keep our archives and heritage running alive in the forefront of our minds and conversations, which is great. We do what we can to keep our work as relevant and as talked about as possible, I suppose. Yeah, and we'll see a little later in our roadmap, but we have taken the opportunity during COVID to expand what we're able to do and what we think would benefit our community in terms of how our organization, YCA, can help our members and the rest of Canada and our archival community around the world with our work and how we can connect with other people and how we can connect despite COVID having emergency measures stopping us from doing things as we are familiar with doing. So lots of questions, lots of discussions to be had, and this summit is the place to have those sort of questions and discussions. And I hope you guys do feel comfortable writing your discussions and your thoughts in the chat as if we were having a coffee meeting together. And share those thoughts, and maybe we might even come up with a solution or two at this summit, and I think that would be a great accomplishment. Just by holding this summit, we can have a solution. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, so enough of me talking. I think we're a little bit early, but I see that our next speaker is up. So I will introduce our next speaker, who will be introducing our opening welcome for the session, Visioning Our Archival Future. I'll invite Honorable Minister Ranj, our Minister of Tourism and Culture in the Yukon, to give us a welcome remark. I'm just searching for you. Hello. I'll stop share screen and then I'll hand the floor over to you, if that's okay. All right.
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you for giving me. I might use a couple of minutes because I'm awful excited this morning, and I've got a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Starting off, look, I of course feel very grateful to be sharing comments with you today from the traditional territory of the Kwanlin Dün First Nation, from the Ta'an Kwäch'än Council, and I see you'll have members from both nations here already, and will be joining you at different points today. It's an absolute honor to welcome you to this year's virtual summit. Preserving Yukon's documentary heritage is a vital endeavor. And of course, archives play such an important role in holding and providing access to accurate records. They offer the ability to understand our past and provide insight into future decisions and directions. And I'll give you an example of that in a few minutes. The archives have the potential to tie communities together as a repository of documentary history and collective memory. Whether they are written, oral, or visual, archival material is important in telling and sharing a complete Yukon story with as many perspectives as possible. As the number of groups in the territory involved in archival research and preservation expands, new technologies and resources will lead to exciting progress and opportunities. And the Yukon Council of Archives plays an integral role in facilitating the development of Yukon's archival community, and I would like to recognize their efforts today. Whether through events like this or the amazing work being accomplished through the Community Archivist program, the Yukon Council of Archives has us covered from the databases to the desiccants. And working together is, of course, fundamental to our success. Gatherings such as this one is so important for developing skills and in the exchange of knowledge and ideas. And again, archival work has so many dimensions, and it is inspiring to see present representations from such a wide range of organizations coming together for the archival cooperation throughout the territory. The work that all of you do is important, and I thank you for your efforts. I look forward again to presentations and discussions throughout the summit as we look forward to the future of Yukon's archival efforts. I'm just looking at the screen. I hope here we go. Let me switch over to gallery. There we go. I would just wanted to share some prepared remarks, but I also just would like to share a couple of casual comments with you. First, I had an opportunity just a few days ago, and I want to thank Linda for spending a bit of time with me. And we had a discussion about just how important the work of so many individuals across the territory is. And I want to just send you a genuine thank you for all of the individuals who spend time volunteering on these endeavors and are so passionate about the history of the Yukon and the work that you do. We in my discussions with Linda, we just chatted a bit about as well this partnership and emergence between First Nation governments and their heritage departments as well, and the important work that's being done. And it's a pretty exciting time as well with all the work that has been done to date across the territory. Over the last year, I had an opportunity to stop in and sit with a number of First Nation heritage directors and chat about their vision for the collections that they have and the absolutely important work that they do. So I'm just going to share a couple of fun things with you this morning, if that's okay. And then I know you have important work to do. And really, I'm going to take that opportunity to share it exactly over with my coffee and having a discussion with you. So, what dawns on me about this important work is something, my post-secondary studies focused a lot on history, and I just feel it's absolutely so important, the work that you're doing, and have always been passionate about it. Yesterday I had the opportunity to sign off on a document that came to me. It was really around historical place names, and it was an application that had come through. And what was amazing about it, as I read through it and signed off, it was really about a name that had been used for a particular traditional landmark area in the traditional territory of Champagne and Asiatic First Nation. And the amazing part about it was it was a request to change a name, and a name that was the previous name was really inappropriate, and it was time to look at a traditional Southern Shoshone name for that area. And what was incredible to me about it was as I went down and looked, part of that application was that you had to identify what resources provided you with the guidance to identify the appropriate name versus what it had been called after contact. And what I found amazing was there was 3 names there, and one individual still does a lot of work around heritage, but the other 2 people who were identified are no longer with us. And the fact that the archives of, within that nation, through interviews and conversations, provided the appropriate direction from those elders, and then was captured in the archives there, gave us the foundation now to be able to support the change in his name. Now, I don't want to be disrespectful. The only reason I feel a little bit I feel comfortable speaking about this is because it's the great grandfather of my children who was the individual who provided the guidance. So what an incredible thing to be going through an application and seeing 2 very significant members of that nation, at least one that I had an opportunity to meet, to be in a situation where that becomes the basis for a very appropriate change that will be supported to happen. And if we didn't have that captured conversations in history and direction, that endeavor would be much more difficult. So I just think that's so exciting to see, things like that come to fruition, but really it's because of the work of the heritage there. Secondly, I'm just going to read something to you that I think you might find interesting. So as the last 2 years have been very difficult for all of us, I had a visit with at the archives. I don't know, it was probably about, folks might be online here even from the archives right now, I was about, let's say, I'm going to say within the last 2 months. And what I found incredible about that visit was that during the visit, there was some documents that were pulled out to show me, just as an example of the amazing things that we have access to. And the items, and when we talk about understanding our history so we can, prepare and work through for our future, I think this is a great example. Look, I'll be a tiny bit on a sensitive note. I think over the last while, we've heard folks say, especially as we've dealt with issues around COVID, there's a lot of conversation around governance and governments and how we should handle things, and how have we got to this place where government is stepping in and they're asking the people of Canada or from the Yukon to take significant steps and sacrifices and precautions. And it's tough, as you know, you're trying to do your very best in this job, and you're trying to ensure that you keep as many people safe as possible. But so you can imagine, it was very intriguing to see this document I'm going to read to you. So, and especially when we think about how could things ever get to where we are now. So this document, which the team at the archives pulled out, I thought it was just fantastic. So by the authority of the acting gold commissioner of the Yukon territory, and on the account of this territory being threatened by the epidemic of Spanish influenza, now raging outside, the undersigned medical health officer of the Yukon territory and the city of Dawson request that all citizens of Dawson to observe the following rules of precautions. The Safe Six. Doesn't say Safe Six, but there's 6 of them, and and here they are. Making sure for personal cleanliness. So you better be washing your hands and taking care of yourself. Spray your mouth, nose, and throat 2 to 3 times daily with medicated solution obtained from the druggists, from the drugstore. Do not cough or sneeze without covering your mouth and nose. And expectorating is offensive, so I guess don't be coughing on anyone. Wear warm clothing and avoid exposure to drafts and severe cold without protection. Keep houses well ventilated, and as you can imagine, right now we're seeing schools and institutions across the country change their ventilation systems and put in and put in new infrastructure. Use disinfectant for sprinkling floors, hotels, stores, and all public places to observe this rule. Okay, so all the businesses have to stay clean, and we got to make sure that we're constantly looking after the next group of customers that come in. Carry on your person some disinfectant such as eucalyptus, carbolic, or Lysol. I guess that's your hand spray. If the public will observe the above precautions, they will act as a preventative should disease reach here. Dated at Dawson in the Yukon Territory, this 28th day of November, 1918. So you can imagine when I have a chance to see that, it kind of makes you feel a little better when you're like, yeah, I don't think we're doing anything different. I think a bunch of Yukoners figured this out like about 100 years ago, and they put their Safe 6 in. And then there's a whole other part of those documentation. It's over 100 pages, the complete file, but it also gets into the fact that there was a quarantine measure. So if you were coming over from Little Gold, from Alaska into the Dawson, you had an obligation to self-isolate for a period of time. So I think, anyway, I got a kind of a neat kick out of that, and it's something I think we should probably be sharing with all Yukoners. The last piece I'll share with you. This is more on a personal note, but I do spend lots of time when I have the opportunity to dig around and to just look through, as much as I can, my own, family history and archival history. And so I'm just going to read a couple of little snippets. It's more about the beauty of the material that's out there and that folks archive. And it's not so much pertains exactly to the Yukon, but I think it's kind of neat. So I'm just going to read to you. This is from deep archives inside it. It's Nova Scotia Archives, and it's from a place called Inverness County in Nova Scotia. And it's just a group of historians and archivists that pulled material together over the years. And there's a number of volumes that are available. And so there's quite a bit here. I'll just jump through two quick things and then let you on with your day. But I think this is kind of fun. So I'll first talk about a family called the Tulloch McDonalds. So the Tulloch McDonalds, a family of prowess and high spirit, are descended from Angus, son of John Duke, who's, and then it gets into some serious Gaelic, and I apologize, my pronunciation on Gaelic is tough. Son of Ronald Moore V, chief of Keppoch. The Tullocks of Inverness County are from Captain Angus Tulloch McDonald and his wife and daughter of McDonald Killinate, and a family descended from Donald Glass the Sixth of Keppoch. Captain Tulloch and his brother-in-law of Atonofif Dua gallantly distinguished themselves at the capture of Louisbourg in 1758 and were handsomely pensioned by the British government. So they led that charge, the fall of Louisbourg, Fort Louisbourg, 1758. And then what happened was they were given a land parcel as part of their remuneration. And the land parcel was about 1,000 acres on a lake and in Nova Scotia. Next, I'm going to just jump down 2 paragraphs to the next piece, which I found. It said, and now we're going to talk about their neighbor. Captain Angus McClellan, who came with his father from Scotland to Antigonish, afterwards took up a farm at Westlake in the neighborhood of the Tulloch estate. He was married and had a young family coming here, owing to his military position and association in the old land. The captain and his family would appear to have some advantages over most of their neighbors in respect of headlights. I think that's intellect. They could read and write some and talk plenty English of a special brand. This is kind of wild, the next piece. Naturally, the gallant captain was also a soldierly turn of mind. He was not one little bit too easily scared. At that time, Westlake was like the rest of the wide forest, abounded in wild animals. Bears and deer were particularly plentiful. Armed with only a woodsman's axe, Captain McClellan killed 6 of the former and 1 of the latter. So I guess 6 bears and 1 deer with an axe, as a pleasant diversion from the day's drudgery. And wandering moose that came within the reach of his musket paid the penalty of nature so quickly, they never knew what happened. And that gets into the piece. So why I'm sharing that with you today is, after I read that, the funny part about it is that was about 6 generations ago. And I shared it with my colleague because after I read that about a year ago, what I thought was kind of funny was 6 generations later, the guy that's sitting next to me, who happens to be my boss, is the 7th generation of the Tulloch family, which I never knew, and tracked it back. And the McClellan family, who lives next door, is my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And so when I'm sitting next to Sandy Silver in the Legislative Assembly, after reading that archive, I think it's kind of funny that we never knew that if you go back to the late 1700s, our direct grandparents, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, actually, after coming from Europe, lived next to each other after the Battle of Louisbourg. And by some amazing miracle, we got to come here and become Yukoners. So with that being said, look, as you can see, I could get into this all day. There's much more important work than my muses on history and archives. Just want to thank everybody for all the work that you do. Again, I just want to share with you as well that as long as I'm in my role, the support for what you do will continue to be there. I think it's extremely important. And I really just want to thank people who take so much time from all the different priorities that we have in our lives to do important work. And many of you just do it because of your passion and love of what you do. So thanks again. I hope everybody has a great day. I'm going to listen for a bit, and I have to go into a cabinet meeting in a little bit. But until then, have a fantastic day. And again, to the organizers, if there's anything I can ever do more to support your work, you know, I'm only a phone call away. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, calls. All right. Thank you, Minister, for that wonderful piece. It was very, very interesting, and I think we learned something new from that. And I especially think it is absolutely wonderful that we definitely aren't doing as much as the six health safety needs from the influenza, which is just a lot. I don't know if we'd be able to implement all those measures the same way we would if we were to have that all implemented presently. So yeah, that was interesting. Well, next, I'm just going to share screen again. On our list is our Yukon Council of Archives President, Linda Johnson. She'll be providing a speech, everyone, and you can see her on our main screen. And I'll let you carry it away.
Dana ja, sha, shoi clay. That is my beginner Southern Tushone greeting to you this morning. Thanks to our esteemed elder, Linda Harvey, who helped me practice a little. Obviously, I need to practice more. However, this morning, I'm so grateful to be here with all of you from wherever you are, and to acknowledge that we are sharing this beautiful territory, this beautiful place here at the Yukon Archives. We are on the traditional territory, as Minister Pillai acknowledged, of the Kwanlin Dün First Nation and Ta'an Council. And we're surrounded by the traditional territories of all the Yukon First Nations, all of whom have participated in the Yukon Council of Archives. And we're very grateful for all of that participation and interest and excitement and passion for archives, which of course is near and dear to our heart. Oh, my name, as Jenny Lou said, is Linda Johnson. I was born in Ottawa to my mother, who Juanita, who is of Scottish ancestry from New Brunswick, a close neighbor of Ranj Pillai's great-grandparents, now that I know. and my father Charles from Manitoba, who was from Swedish immigrant parents, and he was a first-generation Canadian. So my roots are very much grounded in Europe and also in Canada, and also understanding the changes that happen as people migrate, including myself, because I came from Ontario to work at the Yukon Archives in 1974. And since then, I've had the great honor to work among Yukon people in all communities and from all backgrounds as an archivist and a historian and a writer, to preserve memories and to document vital information for the benefit of both present and all future generations. As Jenny Lou mentioned, the Yukon Council of Archives was founded in 1986, and I was privileged to be a founding member. It was a very exciting new time where we came together in the Yukon to form a network of people and organizations working in archival heritage preservation. And from the very beginning, we had many First Nations members who consistently reminded us that archives are not just documentary sources on paper or in other, hard forms. They're also the memories and languages and knowledge of the oral traditions, especially of our First Nations. All of those records are the foundation, truly the foundational records of our Yukon, of our communities. Now I'm serving as the interim president of YCA because recently our president elected last year, Carly Leonard, has moved to a new position here at the Yukon Archives from her previous archivist role at the Yukon Native Language Center. And so I am pleased to be serving you, I hope temporarily, because I'm hoping that we will have new members of our board coming from all of you who are participating throughout the Yukon today. YCA has grown tremendously in the last 4 decades. It encompasses in our programs and our services all 14 of our First Nations, cultural centers, museums, heritage organizations and societies, and dozens of individuals. And we're all working together to ensure that our diverse and now very dispersed archival heritage is preserved and available, related to our knowledge, traditional knowledge, languages, and the cultures, all of which need to be preserved and passed on to our future generations. In this time of tension and troubles throughout our world, I think our message and our goals are more important than ever. And they're clearly needed, that traditional knowledge, languages, cultures, and documentary evidence is really vital to preserving identity and even to preserving life itself. Very important. So we sponsored this summit this year to build, as Jenny mentioned, on our previous summits, and to highlight the work of building the archives of the future. It's going on here in every community in the Yukon and right around the world. We wanted to showcase the active recording by our youth here, who are learning their traditional languages, and they're using both old and new archival sources. As Ranj mentioned, the older archival sources are a wonderful inspiration to what we do today. I also want to acknowledge all the other people who are documenting stories in various ways. And throughout our conference, you're going to hear from people who are doing oral history in communities, and filmmakers and others who are helping to tell and preserve our many, many diverse stories. And to give a shout out to all the archivists and archival workers and record keepers who are thinking critically about best practices to ensure the preservation of our documentary heritage. So this YCA Summit of 2022 is entitled Visioning Our Archival Future. And we wanted to take that opportunity to hear from all of you, both many people here in the Yukon, but well beyond, about where is our archival heritage now and where do you feel you want to take it. In closing, we want to thank the Yukon government, and our current minister and past ministers have really provided so much support to us, both inspirational support, but also the financial support that keeps us going. And over the past 5 years, that financial support has allowed us to fund, through the Yukon Archives, the Community Archivist Project. And Jenny Liu has been our community archivist and done an amazing job in meeting everybody wherever they are at with their current archival requirements. And with the assistance of our board and others, to come together and develop this roadmap that we're going to be sharing with you shortly, and also all the various connections that we keep alive and we continue to expand. I want to give a special thank you to Jenny Liu, who makes us look beautiful. All of our conference materials and our services are represented in very appropriately fireweed colors for the Yukon. And I think that the art and beauty that she brings is so much a part of our culture here in the Yukon. And we're very glad to welcome her now as a permanent resident of the Yukon. No more back and forth to Mississauga. We've captured her and she's here permanently in the Yukon, which we are very grateful. Now, while we can only meet virtually this time, we know the discussions will be as full of meanings and connections as our past summits when we were together in person. It's something we hope we really be able to do again in real time, in real places, in person in the near future. But meanwhile, this virtual format allows us to gather together in larger numbers and from many more locations than previously. So we welcome everyone from wherever you are watching and participating today and over the next 3 days. Gunasjish, Masicho, Shanithan, thank you and merci. It's good to be together.
Thank you, Linda. I was just thinking, I remember when I first came up here from Mississauga, Ontario, and I know that my family was like, Yukon, why are you going all the way up there? And then I remember when in the first year, I know that when my mom went onto the YCA website 4.5 years ago, she was like, are you sure this is okay? We can't, there's no, I can't find all the information I thought I would need online. And then so we thought that we should rebrand ourselves, right? And I don't know if everybody knows about fireweed, but fireweed, after there's a forest fire, the first plant that comes up from the ashes is the fireweed in the springtime. And I and our board at the time thought that was the best way to represent us as sort of rising from the ashes and blooming and then spreading, I guess, our archival spirit through the imagery of fireweed. So yeah, that's how our overly pink fireweed branding came to be, and all this flowers that keep blooming on our logos and our presentation slides that you will see today and throughout the next few days. Yeah, a little fun fact and a little bit down our my memory lane. Thank you, Linda. All right, I see we have our next keynote speakers on, and so I will introduce our next keynote speaker with opening slide right here. Let's welcome Jessica Bushey. She will be speaking, and her title is Virtual Engagement, Archives Pandemic Pivot, which is very fitting. Jessica has been the archivist at Monova Museums and Archives of North Vancouver since 2018, and she has also taught courses in archives management at the University of Victoria and the University of British Columbia. And she's also an artist. And Jessica is represented by Monica Ray's gallery in Vancouver, BC. I was very excited when I saw there was another archivist artist out there. So felt very close at heart with a colleague, Jessica Bushey. And so I will now stop sharing screen and hand the floor over to Jessica. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I really appreciate the invitation to speak with everyone today. First up, I just want to say that I am speaking to you from the ancestral and unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam people. And my background is that I was raised in the Eastern and Western Arctic, but in the Northwest Territories in Yellowknife. So I know what the winters are like. I have been there in minus 45 below weather waiting for the school bus. So today I am just going to speak briefly and inspire, hopefully, everyone about the next coming 3 days. So if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I'll just wait till that's made able. And I'm going to just briefly talk about what's been going on at the archives of North Vancouver. Thank you. In the last 2 years, because as we know, it's been a very interesting time, and it's been a very difficult time, especially for community archives, to be able to reach beyond the physical walls of our buildings, in which many of our patrons, our community members have not been able to come in and visit us. So how do we bring the archives outside of the building and engage our community and support our community? So hopefully everyone can see the screen. Can you? Yes. Great, thank you. I just know with technology, sometimes we start talking and we lose our audience because the image isn't the right one. So what I'm just going to show here briefly is the Minova website, but this is a blog that we created 2 years ago. And I know when I first pitched this idea to my director, they said, nobody does blogs anymore, but we needed a platform to be able to communicate with our members in a safe way. And so we started to create content about the archives and about issues that are relevant to our community members. And you'll start to see here, we have things where we were just really reintroducing the idea of what is the archives, what can you find here, and trying to send them to our online database so they could start doing a lot of remote research that we could support them with, and they didn't have to come in. We also, like everyone else all over the world, were part of this change and the realization that, of course, social justice is and should always be part of the archival agenda, and that we constantly, as archivists, need to be questioning not only our own bias, but the biases that we have inherited through the colonial infrastructure that created such institutions such as archives and museums. So we've done an effort within our organization to really try and make sure not only are we taking workshops on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but also to reach out and share what we've learned with our community members. So, for example, this blog post was on how to read historical photographs, and what we discovered in a sign that was very hard to see, one of our archives technicians, was that this, what seemed like a simple image of a grocery store in North Vancouver, actually had a sign that was a racist sign, talking about segregation, talking about, whites only. And so we talk here and explain and reach out and say, when you're looking at images in archives, you need to interrogate them. You need to look beyond just, what you think might be the historical surface content, and really look at the context of when these were created. And we also then gave some suggestions for visual literacy for people to look into. The next example I'm going to show, and did my screen change for everybody and they're now looking at colorful things? Great. So as part of the pandemic, we, like all of you, were suddenly wondering, how do we support our community and how do we document this, global difficulty? And so we participated in a study initially that looked at how could we build empathy in our community and how could we connect our isolated members. And so what I came up with was this idea of North Van Stories Living History. And we had a small community fund, grant fund, that allowed us to have Zoom conversations and physically distant recordings with different members of our community that were identified as being part of a vulnerable or marginalized group. And so we did this with other partners in our community, such as the Multicultural Society, such as the North Shore Pride Alliance, and some of the churches in the area as well. And so I'm just going to show this to you, but when I speak again at the end of the conference, I'll actually play some segments of these because they really are rooted in an oral history tradition. This idea that telling stories about our personal experiences of events and of history are so meaningful, and they often add a form of archival record that doesn't exist in the written form. And I have found over the last 2 years, when there is a gap in your holdings on a certain topic or experience or area, one of the best ways to gather information that can be shared with your community is actually to turn to the community, ask people who have been involved in that, ask people who are the children of or the grandchildren of those events. The other thing I wanted to point out is that one of the other things we did is we started doing a lot of online exhibitions, and this is the archives, not the museum. So these are purely driven by archival sources, maps, photographs, again, some of our oral histories. And why we were doing this was, again, because we knew that our patrons couldn't come into the archives. And so we wanted to let them know what's in the holdings and how they could interact with them. So this particular piece here that I'm showing is called an archival view. And this was a history of photography on the North Shore, but instead of focusing on traditional images of white settlers, men who were powerful and were part of logging and part of, shipbuilding, we tried to focus on using a critical lens, one of feminism and decolonization, to try and find images of women and find images of Indigenous people that were taken by Indigenous people. And we also created questions for our audiences to consider, well, what is missing and why have we chosen these particular images? And this has been a very successful exhibition and is actually being chosen to be part of a larger lens-based festival in Vancouver, and that typically attracts a contemporary art audience. So we're quite excited that we're being able to show daguerreotypes, salted paper prints, carte de visites, tin types, and that the language that we've used, the interpretation, comes through this critical lens and really says, what are we seeing here? Who could afford to have these types of photographs taken, etc. The other activity we started doing at the pandemic is annually we are now engaging with youth, so high school students and their art teachers, to do what I call sort of artists in the archives, and it's a form of disrupting the historical narrative that is so common that we find perpetuated in many forms of programming around archives. And so one of the things I really like to do is I like to use the online environment to interact with things. And so here's just an example. These are all the high school students that participated in the activity. And what we did is we gave them a historical photograph, and then they were allowed to have a copy of it, and then they could paint and draw and, you know, tear on it and do whatever they wanted, using a critical lens and incorporating ideas they have about the way history has evolved and what are contemporary issues that they wanted to bring to the forefront. And so the interesting thing about doing this online is we were allowed to use this unique slider technology that is just so fun, because as you can see, this was the original image. And then the young artist, Sophia Catala, took it and decided to talk about what she calls British everything. So the colonial influence on the environment, on, you know, British Columbia, very colonial term that we have for our province name. And she talked about the damage to the environment. So she's talking about colonialism as well as climate change. And it's just really enjoyable to be able to use technology to dive deeper and sort of disrupt things that normally we wouldn't be allowed to do if we were in the physical space. So the very last thing that I'm going to bring up and show you, and then I'm open to any questions about things, is this billboard project. So Jenny so kindly mentioned that as well as being an archivist and an educator, I am also an artist. And so during the pandemic, like all of us, but especially artists, I struggled to understand how I could process what was going on for me and for my community in a visual way. And I ended up, because my research interests are connected to social media and to online environments, I ended up looking at Googling questions on the internet. And if any of us recall, oftentimes you're given suggestions, and those suggestions that are given to you by the platform are typically reflective of your location and the most common questions that are being asked in your location. And so what I did is I obsessively started to screen capture those suggestions. And in March 2021, I ended up making a series of works. Several of them were selected to be put on billboards so that people didn't have to go into a gallery space to interact with them. So this was a COVID-friendly way to actually exhibit the artwork. And what I really enjoyed about this was I spent quite a bit of time hanging out near my billboards. Especially on a Saturday morning, and having discussions with people who would walk by, and they would stop and they would look at it. And what I tried to do with most of my work was to try and make it somewhat either uplifting or connecting. And because of course there's many depressing aspects and terrible tragic aspects about the pandemic, but I tried to see if I could find suggestions that had been given to me by the Google Oracle, as I called it, and try and make it a bit more harmonious. This is another image here of a different billboard that I did in a different location. And yeah, it was a very interesting body of work to work with. And I found the conversations that I had, it eventually did go into a gallery as well. And people were invited by appointment to come into the gallery. And it really was an amazing opportunity to learn, again, more stories about how people were resilient through such a difficult time. So that's an example of using, in some ways, big data to create small moments of connectivity between ourselves. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and that is the end of the sort of visual part of my presentation. But those are all topic areas, and I think that we can explore further throughout the rest of this summit, from what I understand, and some of the amazing other speakers I've seen that are going to share their projects with us. I think that what we can take away right now is this idea of going in many ways outside the walls of the building and trying to engage each other on these different levels, and really reinvigorate our understanding of the relevance of archives and the relevance of community archives at this time in our lives. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and to look at what I had to show.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was really inspirational, really uplifting. I know that's why I asked. I was like, did you have something inspirational that you could share? And you brought it. It was perfect. And I just was thinking, we are really challenging our sense of perspective. I mean, we've always had, that's how history has played out. But even more so now, we're just like, our perspective of the past, reinterpreting the past in the present time, as such with the project with the artworks the students did with the archival photos. And then at the same time, reinterpreting how we even perceive archives as both like the records and oral history, and as archives in terms of art. I mean, all of that is really interesting. And of course, I don't think we have a solid answer about how it is, but I can see that I'm really jealous of Manova being able to, like, I wish our websites could look as awesome as that. I obviously don't have the technical expertise to be able to do anything that awesome. So really envious, and really put on a new perspective about what we can do with technology, despite how much especially I'm starting to hate technology. I'm just like, oh, computers again. I want to go for a walk. But we can do something awesome with technologies, and it's really great to be able to see that in a art and archives form, because that's near my heart. Being able to see archives as art as well, and bring that to the present and bring that to the people and our users. So I see that we have some comments and questions in the chat, and I'll just read them. Awesome, Jessica, emoji star eyes, and there's 3 of them. Joy Rose says that was really great, thank you. And then Joy also says, was there a project addressing collective grief? If not, how might we start thinking about doing this in our community archives or across the spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question by Joy. And I did just type a little bit of a response there. So we didn't do there is, obviously in the personal accounts for the North Van Stories Living History Project, in those videos, there is discussion of their own personal grief, and they are very moving. And I cried many times when watching, even though I was involved in the creation of these videos. And we did have, through our partnership that we did have a pastor who was available for trauma counseling, and we were very careful around proceeding with our participants in this way because of the topic area. But we have not done a project that addresses directly collective grief. I would say that what this shows is individual grief. And what we had hoped, though, was by sharing these personal stories that others who were feeling isolated, who were grieving, who were dealing with loss, would find some connection and comfort by being able to participate through viewing and watching these videos. But I think that much more can be done, as many practitioners know that are dealing with trauma-based practice, that can be done in that area around the pandemic for sure. And you know, just I myself have felt like the compounding effect of the pandemic, and then, you know, now with world politics the way they are, you know, it definitely feels like a layering of stress, right? And I think that that's an important thing for us to address, and also as archivists who are receiving and creating and dealing with these types of either oral histories or physical, you know, documentary evidence. So it's a great question.
Okay, we got another one from Leslie. She says, hi, Jessica, were you able to access project funding to carry out these wonderful projects?
Yes. So Leslie, that's a good question. And I'll also go back to something that Jenny mentioned when she first was saying, whoa, like the skills needed. So I will be very transparent in that I spent, you know, 20 years running a photography design business. So I have you know, mad skills in Adobe Creative Suite, and that has come in very handy because there wasn't particular funding per se that we had to do certain projects. Now, I'll say that with a caveat, like the artists in the archives, that's just part of our regular operations. And so I just, during our time, we just found time to do it. But we do have a web programmer who is a consultant or a contractor who works with us. And you know, between her and myself, we do come up with, oh, wow, there's a plugin for our WordPress website that can do this slider, or there's a plugin that can allow us to make a photo album and flip the pages, which I'll show you the audience on at the end of the summit, how we did that. And so, yes, one of the things I tell my students right now is that I feel that archivists are having to have skills that we aren't taught in the master's programs or in our certification programs. And those are skills of knowing how to do interviews using recording equipment, knowing how to use video equipment, knowing stuff about editing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've used Premiere Pro to edit tiny little videos for anything that we're doing. And that is definitely expensive. It's a resource. You have to have the software, you have to have the license for it, you have to have, I mean, I do a lot on my phone, and that's my personal phone, but yes, organizations that can invest in some sort of digital cameras, you know, but it is a huge area of learning about digital content creation and then having some design sense too. When we do our exhibitions, I'm just kind of like, well, does that color look good? It would be great to have a designer, but you know, we don't. Now, the pandemic project that I did, North Van Stories, we had a $5,000 community grant to do that. And that really helped because I was able to pay a coordinator, a wonderfully talented young woman who basically was the liaison, and she also had some incredible editing skills. And without her, I don't know if I could have done that, because I do all these projects as also running the archives, and we only have 2 full-time people, me being one of those full-time people. So yeah, it's difficult. What software product did you use for the photo slider, for the student artwork? That's a plugin for WordPress, but I can follow up on what that is. Our website's built on WordPress, so anything we use has to be a plugin that works with WordPress, but I can definitely share that with Jenny and she can send that out.
Perfect. Yes, we're all curious about that. I know I've looked at all the WordPress plugins as well, and dreamed as a not-for-profit. Of course, we don't have any money Fun stuff. So yeah, definitely. We are archivists that have now need to become like jack of all trades. One of the things I guess I will share as a also archivist and artist who have designed our websites for this for YCA. Without any money, we really got to do a lot of searching for freewares and free softwares for a lot of design and editing. I mean, the Adobe suite is so useful, but they're so expensive, and their license is crazy, and it just keeps getting crazier every year. So yeah, not difficult. We think archivists have our job as the normal functions of archives, but then we also have all these other stuff, which of course make our work so much more fun, but also it also really depends on the staffing and the skills that the staff have, right? So yes, for sure. Very relevant and very real problems to have. I'm glad we're able to talk about it because it is a hidden sort of, I guess, service or function of an archive that we don't always get to touch upon. Yeah.
Yeah, I've really found, I mean, I'm a bit biased because I teach a course on public archives, public service, and we talk a lot about outreach and engagement, programming, advocacy, and those are areas that I don't feel were very emphasized in my education. And I know, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago at the Association for Canadian Archivists conference, there was a task, like a special task group that had been asked to look at how archives could be sort of more proactive or more able to do this kind of work. And the results came up that partnerships with, you know, filmmakers, journalists, certain, you know, schools, and really trying to kind of share that burden of those skills, which are very difficult to obtain. And also sometimes you might have a practicum student or a volunteer that has those skills, but as we know, you know, those are temporary kind of projects that happen, or temporary people on your team. And it's really hard to do these types of things without shared resources coming, even sometimes trying to, you know, do something with the library. And sometimes libraries nowadays have more makers spaces that you can utilize. Like the public libraries here have really started getting in scanners or digitization software for films, things like that. And sometimes if you can, you know, yeah, try and exploit those in some ways, it's easier for a really resource limited or human resource limited community archives.
Thank you. We're running into our break, but I'm just going to read this last comment from Joy. She says that I saw Camtasia, a lighter weight video capture discount for nonprofits on TechSoup.ca a while back, but true, really hard to get discounts on Adobe design programs. Yes, I use like GIMP, and we're on Mac, so I use like Gravit Design. I'm not promoting them. It's not an advertisement, not paid for this, but they're free and easy for not-for-profits or low-budget projects. And the features are limited, but we do what we can to get things done. And thank you, Jessica. Perfect segue on partnership. This is what our summit is all about. We're searching for how we can partner with other resources that are beyond archives, because you know, we are each only just one person, and we can't learn everything. As we know, the world is really big, and there are people who are professionals out there and have great interests in their own skills that they nurture. So yes, wonderful. We'll have to talk more about partnership. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you. So now we're running into our break. I'll let you guys have a sip, a drink, go to the washroom, take a stretch, and I'll see you guys at 10:30, and we'll start right away with our round table. So yeah, give you guys a moment to breathe. Okay. from lunch, guys.
Okay.
We're going to get started. Our moderator is Linda Johnson today, and we're going to start our session with an intro from Linda.
Danaja Shan Shoikli. I am very happy this afternoon to be here speaking from the traditional territories of Kwanlin Dün First Nation and Ta'an Kwäch'än, and to be joined by esteemed elder Jessie Dawson from Kwanlin Dün, and also Cruikshank joining us from Vancouver. And a little later on, we're going to do some technical wizardry, and Gingell is going to join us on my cell phone. So assuming everything works, we will be having a very interesting technological revolution here. And what we are going to be talking about is experiences of recording with long ago Yukon elders. We titled this session Talking to the Kids, because that's something that many of the elders would say to Julie and to others of us, that they were really recording memories for their children, their grandchildren, and all generations to come. So just to begin, I'd like to introduce Jessie Dawson, who is the granddaughter of Rachel and George Dawson, and she serves on the KDFN Council and does many other activities as an elder. As a counselor, she takes an active interest in preserving First Nations heritage, languages, and culture. And she remembers her grandmother Rachel's stories firsthand and appreciates all the archival recordings that bring her voice to each new generation. So Jessie, shaitan for being here. Julie Cruikshank is an anthropologist who lived here in the Yukon for many years, and she recorded on elders from the 1960s, late 60s through the 80s, including Grandma Rachel Dawson, Mrs. Annie Ned, Mrs. Angela Sidney, Mrs. Kitty Smith, Gertie Tom, and many, many more. And Julie worked closely with people to ensure that their knowledge was preserved as archival sources and in publications for future generations. She has fond memories of elders saying that they were talking to the kids when they recorded their stories. So without further ado, I think we'll begin with Julie, because the Vancouver location has some technical issues of its own with renovations going on there. So we want to make sure we get Julie's comments before lunchtime is over for the workers. So Julie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, and it's lovely to be here. I have a big, unfortunately, I can't see you fully because there's a big sign saying this meeting is being recorded, and then people have vanished. But I guess that's all right. I'll just work around that.
You
Good.
can press OK.
Okay.
The OK button, and then that will disappear. And you can
Actually, I've got it. There's one called Got It. Should I click that
yes,
one?
got it.
Okay, or got it.
Yes, exactly.
Good. So you just, I'm not quite clear. You wanted me to talk a little bit about the work that we did in the Yukon? Yeah,
Yes.
I was very lucky to come and to move to the Yukon just, I think it was in 1968. So it goes back quite some years. And I lived there for a number of years before I then went back to school again. But during the time there, I mean, I had such good luck to be able to meet and work with elders like Rachel Dawson, Mrs. Angela Sidney, Mrs. Annie Ned, Mrs. Kitty Smith, and many others who wanted to have their stories and their life experiences recorded for the kids, as Linda said. And I must say that when they talked about for the kids, they weren't always talking just about young children. They were talking about the 50 and 60-year-olds who were kids in their times too. So those were some of the real issues that they had, I think, is they wanted their memories recorded, and they wanted them to be somewhere where they could be safely kept. And the Yukon Archives was just a wonderful place for them to be. Linda, were you, this is just a more recent one. We had a meeting a few years ago, and were you the archivist then when there was a discussion about how, with the daughters of all those women? Yes, about how they felt that they wanted their work to be recorded and in the archives, and that they wanted people to be, anybody to be free to listen to it. But if anybody wanted to do something with it, they said, they stressed that they should definitely contact the families and discuss this, much as we did over the years, because this was a long process of their elders being recorded. Do you have questions? Maybe I didn't prepare a speech of any kind, but.
Yeah, I think we all have heard the names, and some of us were lucky again to have had the opportunity to meet those elders, but many younger people have not had that opportunity. And so I wonder if you could just maybe talk a little bit about each of the women from your memory of the kinds of stories that they wanted to share and what it was like to be with them. Where did you record them? Not like today where we're recording in a studio somewhere. Where were you actually working with those?
I think I'll just start thinking early back. Jessie's grandmother was one of the first people who really was interested in having her recorded, Mrs. Rachel Dawson, having her memories recorded. Her youngest daughter, Edna, was a good friend of mine. And I used to, this is something I think was very important for me. I used to talk with Edna and Mary Easterson and a number of women of that age group about what there was that somebody like me, an outsider, could do that might be useful and helpful to do. And this was something that came up, the idea of recording with elders so that their memories could be, so that those elders could pass on memories to younger people, was something that they really felt strongly about. Mrs. Dawson was wonderful. She always had many grandchildren with her, sometimes staying for a little while or visiting. And I remember it was a house, it was such a happy house. Mrs. Dawson were often there together, and we would just sit and talk about various things. And she recorded some memories, maybe not as many as Mrs. Sidney and Mrs. Smith as did, but that was something that was really, it was a really warm relationship I had with Mrs. Dawson, and I think of her often. But then a year or two later, we started, the Council for Yukon First Nations was interested in getting histories of people recorded, and I was friends by that time with Mrs. Annie Ned, Mrs. Sidney, and Mrs. Smith. I should maybe talk about how I met each of them, and I'll come back to them. But they were very well. I will. I'm sorry. I don't have this prepared, so I'm just thinking as I talk. Mrs. Sidney, interestingly enough, I think the person who introduced her to me was Jim Robb, Jim Robb, if you know him, I'm sure you all know the name. He's an elderly person now, but he was a young man in his 30s at that time and considered himself somebody who had worked with people he called researchers. So he actually introduced me to Mrs. Sidney, and she and I became friends over the years and traveled together. I took her to the Toronto Storytelling Festival once, where she was a speaker. We knew each other for many years. Mrs. Ned, her son Elijah Smith actually introduced her to me. He took me out to meet her at one time and said he thought I should know her and maybe be working with her. I think it might be better if you were to ask me some questions, because I can just ramble on. But the main thing was that these women had they really liked the idea of being recorded. We had tape recorders so they could listen quite often to the tapes afterward, and then sometimes make changes to them if they wanted something taken out. And this then grew and continued. And when the Yukon Native Language Center started, I was on staff there, so that allowed me to continue to go and continue working with these women over the years.
Yeah. With all of the women, they really had a strong sense that the information that they had lived, the stories they had lived, the experiences that they had had coming from, well, I guess in the case of Mrs. Kitty Smith, way before white people first appeared in the territory, because she had stories about her first memories of meeting. But they had a real sense of history, I think, that they alone, or they amongst a few people, had witnessed. Would you say that?
I think that's really true. And one of the things that became very important to them was the fact that there were people at the Council for Yukon First Nations who took them really seriously. And I want to credit Paul Burkle for this. He talked, at one time he took me aside and he said, listen, if you're working with these women, you just tell us each time you work with somebody and we will send an honorarium to that person. And they did that for years. I just simply would mention each time there was a visit, and those women felt also that that was very important, that their work was being valued by, adults there who also understood about talking to the kids and how important it might be. They were also, I just was so impressed by the way they told the stories. They told the stories as they had heard them themselves as children. Now, they were telling them in English, but that was because they knew the children would need to hear them in English. But the stories, they used those stories to think with. Particularly the stories that I remember most, though I'm talking generally about Mrs. Dawson, Mrs. Ned, Mrs. Sidney. They developed the stories about young women, who had young women as the protagonist or the hero or the main person, were particularly important for young women to know. There were stories about young men and young women and whatever, but they would say people need to think with stories. That's what they need to do. And so they saw themselves as building an archive of records that people could use to think with. I found that the most compelling part of the work, really, with them. And we had fun. The other thing was I had a car. It was an old beater, but we were able to go around two places. This was really important for them, particularly when we started doing place name work. But to be able to go to places, to talk about places that they had heard about or where the stories seemed to have taken place, that was really important for them as well. So we traveled around quite a bit. And in Mrs. Sidney's case, she wanted to travel on the lakes because that's what she remembered. And we had access to a boat that we were able to take way down to Ben My Cree and hear her stories about where she'd been as a child, not where the Alaska Highway was, because this was all before the Alaska Highway. And
the titles of your books that you help them to write and to publish. Their books. I have always found very interesting. So, my stories are my wealth. Who said that?
I can tell you. I remember that so clearly. That was Mrs. Sidney, Angela Sidney. She said, I have no wealth to leave to my children. I have no money to leave to my children. My stories are my wealth. And I thought that summarized what all the women were saying themselves. I can leave this and it'll be a legacy that will go on. And I hope that's true, that it does.
And then for Mrs. Kitty Smith, her book called Nindal Kwadandur, I'm going to tell you a story.
Yes.
And that's one of my fondest memories of Mrs. Kitty Smith. With you several times and at other times, she would come to heritage conferences, or when the Yukon Archives back in the 70s, we had our Yukon Potpourri series in the evenings. Mm-hmm. And I remember those elders coming, and the whole of what was the YWCA gymnasium then would be full with Mrs. Kitty she and her granddaughter Judy Gingell came that one night, it was a past capacity audience, over 200 people. And Mrs. Kitty was in her element. And that's what I remember about them as well, that they were fabulous storytellers who could grab an audience and keep us completely enthralled, even if they were completely new stories to us.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you talk that one of the things that we did, Mrs. Sidney did, she was invited to a Toronto Storytelling Festival because of someone who was from Toronto came and heard her tell stories. So the two of us went to, I took her down to that place, and it was wonderful for her to have people who weren't even from the Yukon but could also understand what she was saying, to make people aware of what the Yukon was like and how people thought in the Yukon, and that was very important for her, I think. She said she spoke of it as talking to outside people as well as local people. The stories just seem to be so much part of how they made choices and thoughts. So that I was particularly interested in the stories that had young women as the main character, because the kinds of trials they might go through would be the kinds of trials that maybe these women had felt themselves. And so they told stories that had male protagonists, or they were about men too as well. But the stories about women were the ones that I found really interesting, because it was clear that they were thinking with these stories as they told them, thinking about how you live a good life.
And I guess the other thing that struck me about their generosity was that they accepted people from everywhere. With the storytelling festival here in Whitehorse, for example, they would talk they would tell their stories, and they were very keen that people knew that these were Yukon stories. So there was a clear identification with what they themselves could share.
Yeah, and the experiences that they could draw on to share those stories. I think that's really important too. Yeah.
For younger people that are taking on this new role, sometimes new for them, but the role these days of recording elders. We have so many young people that are going to be speaking to us over the next 2 days, including just at the next part of this session. Do you have any sort of thoughts about how you learned to do it, or how you came to the work of recording?
I would just say those women trained me. There's one other thing, and you will remember this, Linda. There was an anthropologist who had actually lived, Kitty McClellan, in the Yukon before, and Angela Sidney particularly remembered her well, and so they were surprised by somebody. This is something that they had certainly seen before. They all loved Kitty very much, I think. She's long gone now, but I think to get to your question, I think it's just making sure that the elder you're speaking with makes the choice of what story to tell, because people they tell particular stories at particular times for particular reasons, rather than having a list of stories you would like them to tell. It's just I think the real thing is being willing to learn to listen, and sometimes that might mean spending quite a bit of time not talking, and then finding out what people would like to tell, so that they're the ones who are making the choices about what they're recording, because those are their recordings. Yeah, I remember the meeting, and I'm just thinking ahead too, when a few years ago, when the families came together and there was a discussion of what should happen with the tapes that were in the archives. And I remember really clearly people saying anybody should be able to listen to them, but if somebody wants to do something with them for educational purposes or whatever, I want them to come to, they would say, I want them to come to me, to the person, to the teller, to ask about how to do that and if it could be done. So they saw themselves as making a kind of curriculum, you might call it, for that people, students and older people should hear. But they led the process, and they decided what stories they wanted to tell, and they did that. And then in that case, I think it was really important I would go home and type the stories up, my little rackety little typewriter, and then bring them back and read them. So they would sometimes make corrections. So they'll say, well, take that part out. I don't think that's the best thing to have there. Or here's the extra part you should add in here. So as long as, I think for younger people, if they realize they are working with professional storytellers, and it's that person who should be the leader. The person who's recording, that's important work, but it's the work of the elders who are talking that is really important to pass on, I think. Does that make sense?
Very much. And I think that Kitty McClellan worked that way too.
Yeah.
Certainly, everywhere that I have been, people really appreciated her, especially at the time in the late 40s and early 50s, when many people were suffering through discrimination and other bad things here in the North, in the Territory. And Kitty was very much viewed as a friend and as someone who loved them and they loved her. Yeah. And it was relationship building that they all did. And that carried on to the end of Kitty's life, really.
Yes, very much. Yep.
Yeah. Now I'm going to excuse myself for a moment and go and phone Judy Gingell, who's waiting to talk to you.
Oh,
and
good.
Turn it over to Jessie Dawson. Maybe you can remember a little bit about her grandmother and listening to stories and being in that house with all the grandchildren.
Yes, I have to say, Jessie, it really reminds me of your grandma seeing you. Really, it's just lovely. She was such a wonderful person and such a good friend to me.
Oh, she was, Julie, and she was my mentor without even realizing she was our mentor. To me, she was grandma. And the one thing I always got from her was her stories. Her stories were lessons, lessons of life. And she was very, very strong in her value, her culture, who she was as a First Nations woman. And that's one thing she instilled in me. And I think she tried to do that with all the other kids, but if she could catch us, because one thing with my grandparents, George and Rachel, that I really enjoyed being a young girl, it was the traveling we had to do. We traveled from here to, I don't know. I always thought my grandfather was the smartest man in the world, because we'd go, he says, let's go for a ride. So we'd all jump in the truck and just go down the road and wherever, and just go wherever, whether it's down the Alaska Highway or the Mayo Road or towards Marsh Lake or towards Carcross, Tagish area. Grandpa always knew where people were, at their own camps. And that's, we'd go and visit. We did a lot of visiting with elders, their friends, Grandma and Grandpa's friends. And if there was other kids, we'd play with the kids or listen to the stories if they were speaking in English. One thing Grandma really didn't want to do is, I found out later, was because of residential school, she didn't want us to learn our language for the reason of learning it. She didn't want us to learn it because of residential schools. She knew what would happen. And, you know, she did her best in making sure her kids, like two of my uncles and my aunt and my uncle were, you know, they went to residential school. My father went to residential school, but for a short time. And those were the reasons she didn't want us to learn, because we get disciplined for speaking our language. You know, she managed to get my aunt and uncle out of there, her and grandpa, out of Carcross, but that didn't stop their grandchildren from attending residential school. For myself, I went to two of them. And the one thing I remember about being there, you know, is I had to be there. And, but we were fortunate, we got to see Grandma and Grandpa on the weekends. And those were the best times when we were able to go and spend time with them on the weekends, because Grandma told a lot of stories, whether they were bedtime stories, you know, to try and get us to bed, or just sitting around in the living room talking, you know, she'd tell stories. And to me, those were the values she was teaching us of who we were with our culture. You know, she says you have to know who you're meeting, whether it's, you know, a man, whether they're wolf or crow. You ask these questions. And I used to always tell her, I remember my first date, and the guy came down to the house down in the old village, lot 226. He came down in a taxi, and I told Grandma, I said, I've got a friend coming, we're going to the movies. And, you know, I just want to let her know, but I didn't expect her to. She went and answered the door, the cab pulled up, he came out, got out of the cab, knocked on the door, she answered. Within no time at all, she had him in a chair. What's your name? Are you Wolf? Are you Crow? What's your mom's name? What's your grandma's name? And all that. I said, Grandma, we're going to the movies. We're not getting married. You gotta know this stuff. And after that, I told my friends, I'll meet you downtown.
That's wonderful. I can imagine.
Yeah, but I realized after why it was important to know those things, because those are who we are as First Nations people. I come from the Wolf clan, you know, and if I get married, I can't marry another wolf. I have to marry a crow. And especially to know my relatives, she says, you've got to know who your family is. And one thing I never did get the chance to ask them is, why didn't you tell me we had so many relatives? You know, it was because every time I turned around, I was meeting a relative, you know, and I thought, where do you come from? How can you be my relative? And it was, I'm still learning. Let's just put it that way. I'm still learning who my relatives are. And it's just amazing how big our family really is.
I'm remembering.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
Just a quick thing. I'm just remembering when you were talking about your grandpa getting kids all in the truck and then going around. I was on some of those trips too, and they were just wonderful. And he was introducing the children to people they needed to know. But I used to, that's one of my very favorite memories, is riding around in the back of the truck with a whole bunch of young people around me.
Yeah. And we'd go, you know, we'd travel everywhere, anywhere. We'd show up at camp, and, you know, they had tea on, and food for the visitors. You know, I remember going to places like with Elder Annie Ned, and I remember my grandparents' friends, Patsy Henderson, and, you know, all the There's so many, and listening to them talk, and I thought, is this what they brought us here for? To listen to them talk in their own language? I often wondered what they were talking about, but I know there was times where we weren't allowed to hear those stories, and times where we had to listen, and
We've got Judy Gingell, I think. Judy, are we still here with you?
Yes, I'm still here.
Wonderful.
I can't hear a thing, but I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you. So
Okay.
would you like to just tell us a little bit about your grandma Kitty and her work in recording stories?
Sure. Thank you for the invite, Linda and Julie. Wish I could see you, but that's impossible at this time, but it'll be nice to hear your voice, and thank you very much. And it's good to hear Jessie off and on, but I can't hear that clearly. But I could remember when Julie used to come and visit my grandmother, and Grandma Kitty would always get excited knowing that Julie was coming down to have tea with her, and that she's going to be talking to Julie. And she would get very, very excited about it. And I believe she used to remember she used to put on her best dress, her best outfit that she had, because she's going to have tea with Julie. And Grandma would just go on and on and on. And I would watch Julie now and then, because I didn't really take in a lot of the stories. But for Julie to sit there and have a lot of patience, and you could tell she was very, very interested, and would ask Grandma a lot of questions, and Grandma would explain things to her. And Julie, I would like to just say that I am so, so thankful for you, a huge interest in spending the time with my grandmother, Kitty Smith, because the books that you have given to me has been well used by myself and other people, because there's a lot of histories in there, and there's a lot of traditional stories about the bear, the beaver, the crow, the wolf, and those are very interesting stories to know, especially from very traditional elders. A lot of them are not with us anymore, so to have it written out, that is just fantastic. Because really, when I was at that age, hate to say, but stories was not really interesting. And it's sad. When I look back now, it should have been. But now that I know I have these books out there, and the books, I make sure I give them out to people, and especially to the young ones in our family, so they start reading these books. But if you see some of my books, there's a lot of red tags that are hanging out that I make a lot of reference back to. So I just want to say thank you. I remember one person say, well, we can't share these stories. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, if my grandmother did not want these stories to go out there, you think she would have talked to someone that was going to put a book together? No, and I'm glad she did that. I'm really grateful to my grandmother, and I'm very grateful to Julie for allowing this to happen. So history's with us either way, it's on the shelf.
Judy, it's just so good to hear you. And I remember visiting your grandmother when she was staying with you at different times as well.
Yes.
Yes, and those are the really strong memories I have of her. I know she really, really loved you. She talked about you too, in such warm words, so warmly. But when I think about her, I think about you too. I must just say that, because I know how much she cared about you, and she was just wonderful to me too. I think she was very wonderful.
I spend as much time as I can with her, and she's told me a lot, and but I spent a lot of time with her, and yeah, I'm so grateful. It's sad, you know. This Grandma Kitty is my father's mother, and the sad part I have is I was not able to spend that much time with my mother's mom, who is Susie Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I missed out greatly on that side. So it just shows you, you know, how important it is that we can have these books to pick up and read. Yeah.
Well, Judy, thanks so much. You know, I hope, I remember one time you coming to Vancouver and we walked around a bit together, and sometimes I would think, I wonder if Judy's ever coming to Vancouver, and if you ever are, I'd love to sit with you and we could talk about your grandma.
Yes.
Other things.
No, and hopefully soon, because I got to go somewhere. I'm getting tired of Whitehorse right now. I need to go.
Well, I'm looking forward to coming to Whitehorse again sometime. I didn't get there this summer, but I would really like to. So we'll manage this.
Thank you so much, Judy. We really appreciate you taking time out today. I know you are on some other missions, so it's great to be able to hook you up by cell phone to other technology. And the next, I'm going to say goodbye to Judy for now. Bye, Judy.
Yeah.
And welcome in Linda Harvey. Linda, are you there somewhere in the ether? Linda?
Unmute. Hello, I'm sorry. I was just trying to find my unmute. I just had it put up to the top there. Yes, I'm here. Danja, Danaja, Nanuj, Flanerju. How is everybody doing?
Good. We're good.
Good.
We're happy you're here. When we just have had a conversation with Julie, recalling some of the elders that she worked with, and also Jessie Dawson speaking about listening to her grandma stories, and then Judy Gingell from her car by cell phone. And so now, Linda, please tell us about your story experiences and recording with your mom.
Okay. I listened and recorded with my mom as she told the traditional story of how the big owl came in and stole the children, and everybody knows that story about the big owl when he came in, but there's one story that I know that not too many people know about. I remember one time at a potlatch out in Champaign, or Haines Junction, pardon me, and I asked Grandma Marge Jackson, because she was, you know, my mom's elder, and so I asked her, I said, Grandma, did you ever hear about the story about Asunya and Tegasta? Asun Shanahya and Tegasta? And she said, no, I never hear about that one. And I went, oh, okay. And then my mom was a real storyteller. She always told stories at bedtime. Of course, that's because we begged her to tell the stories to us. But she learned from her grandma, my great-grandmother, Maggie Broren Shuateen is her traditional name, Grandma Shuateen. And Mom said that night, Grandma would tell her stories. They didn't have TV a long time ago, so that was her entertainment. And just a second, I'm just trying to get these other little things off. Anyway, so and Grandma Marge said she didn't know that story, and so Agnes Moose and Agnes Boss were also sitting around right close together with Grandma Marge. So I asked them both, I said, you guys, do you know that story? And they said, no, we never heard that story before. So there's stories out there still, traditional stories that are not recorded. And this is about Asu Shanahia, is my grandmother raised me, the name, and Tegasta is just a traditional name. And so I could tell you just a little bit about Asu Shanahia and Tegasta. And I remember my mother, even my mom, never told that story for years and years. And it was like I was an adult when I asked her, Mom, do you remember? You know, children remember these things, eh? And I forgot all about it too. And I said, do you remember that story you told us, Mom, about that boy that came back or was born? And then she said, Oh yeah, I remember that one. I said, "Could you tell that to me again?" I told her, and then she said, "Okay." So she started to tell me that story again, and everything she told, and even I was reminding her back, like, remember when he did this, and then she's, yeah, that's right, and because it's been like too many years, like I don't know how many years before she finally started to recall what the sequence of the story. And then,
the fire alarm's going, so we have to leave right now. We'll be back at the Yukon Native Language Center.
Okay. I'm going to excuse myself for just a
Sorry.
second.
I think you guys can keep going, but we have to leave the building.
You can let the
oh no!
Yeah, you carry on wherever in the world you are. It's a fire alarm here.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you so much, Linda, for coming and for joining us and sharing your stories. I wish we could go on forever listening to you guys. It was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much for inviting us. Indeed. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I don't have a camera at home. My name's Caitlin. I'm with the Yukon Council of Archives. So we're just going to play it a little fast and loose, I think. So I think we've got about 10 minutes left in this session. Let me just double check what we're doing today. That's day one. Okay. So it looks like we've got Martina and perhaps Paul Caesar-Jules and maybe Emeral Pope. But until they join us, maybe if we want to just keep chatting informally and hopefully everything's okay and nothing's on fire outside.
We're here.
Oh, great. Okay, lovely.
Everybody's here, and Martina is not talking. I'm just listening, and so it's Emeral and Paul are the next
great.
speakers. Yeah.
Awesome. I don't have an intro for Emeral and Paul. Oh, Jenny has just sent me something, so maybe I can do that. Oops.
I should just say I may have to leave when some work's getting done in our house. And if I leave, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Julie. And
I'll
thank
stick
you,
with you if you don't mind.
Of course, okay.
But if I vanish, it's not because I'm bored. It's because I have to leave.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
So maybe I'll just do a brief introduction for Paul Caesar-Jules and Emeral. The session is called Honoring Our Ancestors and Breaking New Trails. So Paul Caesar-Jules is part of the Mountain People Wolf Clan. He's born and raised in Upper Liard. And Emeral Pope is a Kaska from Tet'eluge Mane, and they're currently at Liard First Nation in the Kaska language department. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I don't have any questions prepared for you, but maybe if you also want to introduce yourselves, I'm sure mine were kind of very short introductions. And I should probably introduce myself too. My name is Caitlin Normandin. I'm an archivist at Yukon Archives. I'm a government records archivist. And I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Kwanlin Dün First Nation and the Ta'an Kwäch'än Council. So I'll just see if Paul and Emeral are there.
Hi.
Hi, both. Thanks for joining us today. I introduced both of you very shortly, but I probably didn't say enough. So maybe if you want to just say hello and introduce yourselves to everybody.
Okay. Do you want to?
Let's go.
Okay. Ezi Dogala Guya ya Ezi Guzaga Kithlama Guya Guskanika Ezi Emeral Pope Guya Espoma Mezi Audrey Chief Guya Espoba Mezi Alfred Allen Pope Guya. I'm really excited because he's actually in the Zoom as well. He just sent me a cute little heart emoji.
And Mazga dine lasta tatslugamanen is de Mazga dine lasta.
Ja. Yeah, Izzy Paguia Guskanika. Izzy Guzagi Kisla ta Guzagi Kwan Dega Kisla. Esmoma Mizi Kalin Caesar Guya. Yeah, Esboba Mizi Ray Jules Guya. My intro.
Mandananda.
Sione Dena Lasta. So
Caitlin, would you be able to make us co-hosts so that we can share?
Yes, of course.
We have a
Yeah,
little
sorry about
PowerPoint
that.
prepared.
Let me just. How do I do that? That is the question.
So what you can do is you hover your mouse over our video and with the 3 dots on the side, you click on that and you can click on, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. The more you know. All right. Let me know if that works for you.
I think it should.
Okay, lovely. All right. I'll just mute myself and just let me know if you have any issues.
I just wanted to double check. Can everybody see our screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's visible. Cool. So
there we go.
Okay. So
yeah. So I don't know how to work this.
You just press the arrow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a photo of me and my cousin Jonathan. Okay. So I kind of said my intro in the beginning. So I'll just say it again. Izi Guzagi Kisla ta Guya. Guzagi Kwan Dega Kisla. My Dene name means our language working man. I work for the language department. When I graduated high school, I felt lost with what I wanted to do with my life. I was told that the language department was hiring for a digitization technician, so I applied. When I got hired, I was astonished by all the old cassette tapes used to record my elders. The only issue was that I couldn't understand the tapes of elders speaking Dene because I didn't know my language. I started learning Kaska as a kid in elementary school, but it didn't stick. I officially started learning Kaska at my job about 3 years ago with my grandma Lita by asking her how to say short phrases. I've learned a lot so far and can somewhat understand what's being said on these cassette tapes.
Now you're, this is there.
Yeah. We have a collection of over 600 audio cassette tapes. They have been preserved since the 60s. Many recordings were made by various community members, many academic researchers, and a local priest. The earlier tapes were recorded by a local priest, Father Gingell. He recorded well over 60 tapes among the Kaska people of Liard River. This was during the time of residential school when a lot of caring parents moved to Liard to be closer to their children. At Lower Post Residential School, my grandparents were recorded by Father Gingell. Here's a clip of Father Gingell elicitating Dene with an elder. So Alaki. Yeah. That's Father Gingell with an elder. I don't recognize the elder speaking, but the recordings are of traditional stories, life histories, traditional knowledge about the land, songs, and genealogy. The elders recorded these because they wanted the future generations to know about their way of life, the history of the Kaska Dene, and Kaska traditional land-based knowledge. Sorry.
Does it go with needing glasses?
No. They also wanted to have the Kaska language recorded so people can learn from these recordings so our language can live on. They also They understood the need for this knowledge to be recorded. They did it for the future generations like us and all those who come after us in mind. It's kind of hot. Because of this, it is important to do everything we can to preserve and protect these recordings, organize them, and make them accessible to all Dene communities so we can all continue learning from these elders, many of whom are no longer with us. I have been contacted many times by people wanting to hear their grandparents, and since I had digitized cassette tapes of them, I could provide it for the families. Now they have the opportunity to listen to them. Through this work, we honor our elders and keep their legacies alive. They are still with us, teaching us, guiding us to live a good life and living according to our Dene laws. A number of the recordings of traditional stories, including some told by my grandparents, having been published in the Dene Kudeji book. The Dene Kudeji book consists of stories recorded with our elders in the summer of 1997. In this book, there are Kaska language transcriptions, inline word-to-word translations, and English free translations. Many different speakers, including my grandmother, a fluent speaker, Caesar-Jules, worked with Pat Moore to write these stories and translate them. This makes the recording accessible for learners. Anyone can follow along, see what the words mean and how they are used in a natural way by fluent speakers. One of the stories I digitized was of my grandpa Alfred. His name is Metsendia. Oh, sorry. Yeah. One of the stories I digitized was my Grandpa Alfred, his Dene name.
Play the clip. Oh. Oh no.
Oh, no.
Okay, we want to play this clip for you guys.
It's a short clip of an interview. He was speaking with Elder Dennis Porter. Hearing my Grandpa Alfred's voice put me in a grateful mood because I only heard stories of him from my mother and family. In this recording, he had people laughing with his stories, and his humor brought so many people together. I shared Estia's, my grandpa, voice with Esmoma, my mom. She got emotional from hearing his voice, and there are still stories told about him that people remember and talk about. Even after passing, his words still live on. I'm able to continue my language learning by listening to our elders' recordings, not only studying what they say in Kaska, but also what they mean. Another resource we were able to learn from was a video of a Kaska elder, Tom Smith, recorded by Pat Moore in 2004. Next slide, 5. Okay. Here's a short clip of his video, Tom Smith.
Okay.
In Tom Smith's video, he tells a story in Kaska. Emeral and I studied the language in that video as well as what he was talking about. He talked about how he was able to live life to the fullest on our land. The point of the story was to show how valuable our land is and that we must protect and keep it. I'm able to learn Kaska and honor Tom's wishes by passing on our language and values by listening to my elders. On these recordings, I'm able to know exactly what they want and need in that moment and for the future, which is my present and my future as well. I'm able to maintain their values by listening to what they say and acting on it. I speak about it and I can pass on their wishes to future generations. Recordings of our elders are important sources of learning and passing on knowledge. When we take care of these recordings and properly digitize, archive, and provide access to them for others in the community, we honor the speakers and all that they have shared with us. We enable their voices to be heard and to continue to be sources of learning and passing on their knowledge for future generations. The elders recorded these recordings so we can learn from them. It is important to remember that communities have personal and emotional connection to archival collections. These are the voices and knowledge of our relatives. Archival materials can serve as an important sources of reconnection between the ancestors who shared the knowledge, the current speakers, learners, and knowledge keepers. They are important sources of language reclamation because listening to fluent speakers talking naturally is vital for learning how to properly speak Dene. Digitization not only preserves the recordings for the future generations, but enables the distribution of them to family members and others in the community so they too can enjoy hearing their relatives and learn from them. Nowadays, it's difficult to share recordings when they are on tapes only. These valuable recordings cannot do what they were meant to do. While the elders recorded them, if they sit in boxes and on shelves, they deserve to have a life in the community among people.
Okay. Cool. So it's my turn now. That was really good, Paul.
So this one.
I'll have to bring this over. We didn't memorize our speeches.
Yeah.
We're reading them. Okay. Okay. What you're looking at on this slide is a picture of Ta'an, also confused as Boy Lake. I wanted to include this in my presentation because it was always a special place for me growing up. It's filled with many happy memories of running around outside and helping my grandparents with work. Currently, I work at the language department of my Liard First Nation administrative office. I learn, teach, and produce materials and resources in Casca. I've been learning Casca for 2 years and teaching it for a semester and a half, along with Paul. The language department works on many projects that require the continued production of materials in Casca for the revitalization of our language. We continue to document our elders and speakers of our community in order to keep up with the different needs of our language learners. We do already have many recordings, but they don't encompass every topic, theme, or need that are asked of us and that we challenge ourselves with. True revitalization of a language is fluency by living our language. And in order to do that, we need everything that's possible to record. We use our elders' stories to learn more about our culture and way of life, and it helps with learning how to speak Casca. I've also been able to read the stories from the Dana Gudaji book and search for verbs to then record into our living verb inventory. We have binders and binders full of sheets of handwritten verb forms. I've been typing up these sheets into Excel sheets on our Google Drive. So yeah, it's just like an example of all the binders we have. And like, there's plenty more. Like, here's one binder that I'm currently working on. So this is our Casca verb inventory that we've been digitizing onto Google Drive. It's organized alphabetically so that we can quickly find what we're looking for. So far, this verb inventory has been used extensively for simple personal questions and for formal educational materials for our Casca classes. Because the verb inventory is saved online, we will always have access on various devices to the verbs without worry of floods or forest fires, which is very much a reality for us in the Yukon. We're hoping that eventually we'll be able to make it accessible to the public online or with the book so that our community can actively use their language in their day-to-day lives. Instead of telling their loved ones to eat in English, they can say natsets. And they can do that by looking it up online or flipping through the book, which will most likely have many additions because there's still so much more language to learn and so many more verbs to record. Recording elders and speakers telling their stories today helps with finding more language that we have yet written. We continue to learn more about our language and culture by continuing to record and preserve their stories. That's why I've been searching for and recording the verbs from the Denagudeji book into our verb inventory, because they are more authentically used while told in stories. As soon as we learn something new, we record it and share it immediately. Happily with our class, we can quickly share these new words and expressions to avid Casca learners. So here's an example of our class. We do kind of like a hybrid teaching method. So if we're able to, and with like COVID restrictions, like allowing, we have like students sitting with us. And then we also have like, you know, the Zoom class, and we share a screen. It's a pretty fun setup. Where was I? Okay. So far, we have developed materials for Casca levels 1 to 4. We've been creating worksheets, homework sheets, and working on and updating resources to make their language learning easier and more accessible. Since Paul and I started teaching after many materials had already been created, we were able to go back to these materials and edit them for our classes. We recorded the worksheets with our elder and speaker, Jocelyn Pillai. And she's really cute. She has been an essential part of the process. A lot of what we do couldn't be done without her, as well as many other elders and speakers who should be forever honored for the work they do. We share these recordings with our Casca learners so they can read and speak Casca more accurately. Here is an example of a worksheet on harvesting plant medicines that we recorded with Jocelyn. So like this is the worksheet right here. We record the entire sheet with her saying each phrase twice. Then we edit the audio into clips for each word or phrase in the worksheet so they can be played individually. Here are clips of the first 3 medicines on this worksheet. So Dutchin Nonet.
Dutchin Nona. Dutchin Nona.
And then Goodsi Donet.
Goodsi Dona. Goodsi Dona.
Already I can hear how I'm supposed to say that better. And then Tahduzet Udzet. The recorded worksheets also help us with our own Casca language learning journey so that we can teach better. Along with producing these new materials, we've been digitizing and preserving them so they can still be of use in the future. One of the materials we have produced is the Casca phrasebook, which is also extensively used in our work and happily with our community. There are many useful phrases in our little book that can easily be used in everyday life. We are currently recording all of the phrases to then post online on social media or share with USB sticks to make it accessible to everyone. They will be able to listen to the phrases and practice pronouncing each word out loud, which will help with their capability of reading and speaking Casca. We're hoping that will also help with their comfort in using the phrases in public, so we'll be hearing Casca spoken comfortably everywhere, like at the grocery store or Bingo Fridays, or even at hand games. So here are 2 I don't know, images of the phrasebook with the bingo and hand games phrases. So I don't know, maybe like next Friday you can say to your friend, "The dude had said Nislon to noon that at. Be sure to win lots tonight." Okay, and here's a pretty picture. These new resources we are creating for Casca Dena will make the old recordings Paul works on more accessible. Once they start learning Casca, they will be able to listen to those old recordings and understand what their ancestors are saying, what their grandparents and great-grandparents are saying. These recordings are direct familial connections, and the current ones will become connections for future generations. Everything we create with our elders and speakers are stored onto our hard drives, Google Drive, and server. We dream that someday we will have our own archive. We want to find more ways to ensure that everything that has been created and will be created will be preserved forever. We're using new technology to make sure that everything is safe and secure for our future generations. Listening, understanding, and preserving these recordings help to preserve our way of life, our values and traditions as Kaska people. In order to honor our ancestors, we keep their lessons in mind as we produce and preserve new materials. We are breaking new trails by exploring and utilizing new technology to preserve our culture and history.
Ja.
Ja. Kala. So yeah, that's it. I hope it was good. And I don't know.
I can't speak for anyone else, but I was just blown away with the amount of work that you've been doing. That is, wow. That the phrase book is incredible. That is amazing. I just wanted to ask, how have listening to the stories impacted you?
I'll quickly stop sharing. How have listening to the stories impacted us? I don't know. Do you want to see that, Paul?
It made me feel really great and like excited about my like my life and my tradition and how I belong in this world. I really enjoyed hearing stories that my grandma told me, and yeah, like I was like feeling lost after I graduated high school, and working here has made me feel like I belong somewhere. I really enjoyed it. I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, listening to the old recordings also, I guess it makes me feel happy because I can actually hear like the voices of like our like elders that have now passed, but we're still able to, you know, like listen to their voices, and in those recordings, if they have any like wishes or like, you know, like values that they want to express and that they want to make sure that we hear as well, that we make sure to listen to it, and we make sure to continue to live and maintain these values that they've passed on. So I guess in some way it's really informative, but it also just makes you feel really happy inside because you get to hear their voices, and it's nice. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, maybe I'll open it up to the floor. Does anyone have questions for Paul and Emeral? Or congratulations or praise, because that was an incredible presentation. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat here.
Yay. Stadza commented my little sister. Yeah, Escoba commented my dad.
And maybe I'll ask Paul, just from the digitization like nerd perspective, what's your setup? How are you digitizing the audio cassettes?
Should we share that photo again of you and Jonathan?
Sure. So how we do it, we have like we use Audacity.
Okay, awesome.
And we have like what you can see from the right to left side of Jonathan. It is it's a Sony TCWE 475.
How the heck do you remember all that?
Constantly writing it within the like items that we use. So we use a Dell Precision 725. I don't know like the recordings of it, but like we use a Focusrite to like connect the cassette dock onto like the adapter, and the adapter connects to the computer, so we can hear the volume from the cassette tapes onto that.
Awesome.
So it acts like a bridge, and so yeah, we use like these papers to like I haven't did this in so long, I'm sorry. Like I've just been like doing so much other things, and that like it's just been like throwing me off so much, and so
no,
yeah.
I was just I'm curious.
That's out of the bag.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You write on those papers all the like, you know, like inconsistencies.
Like what's wrong with the tape?
Yeah.
Like we like preserved cassette tape, and we try to figure out what's wrong with it and if it's okay to record. Yeah, and then like after we're done with Audacity, we use it we go through like embedding the file and like trying to figure out. No, so when we're done recording it, we like create an access copy. So we break it down, and so it's like more consistent, and that we could use that copy as a MP3 file, and we could give it out to like community members who want to hear them. I know that my cousin wants to hear her grandma speak again, so like go through like the recordings of all these cassette tapes that I could find her by typing her name down, because through these paper we type it on an Excel sheet, and within that Excel sheet we can find like names, and it'll like have linkage to the cassette tape she's on. So it's like a lot of like consistent organizing and just being consistent with how you work, and through that we could like find how easy it is to find a speaker. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's incredible that you just be able to like send the MP3 file, and then you're also able to search for people's names. There's Jennifer Sargent is asking if there's been a lot of interest from the community, and that she can imagine it's inspired a lot of people to learn and contribute.
Like I know that some people like show up, but like I honestly don't know how to like go. Like I went door to door before, and that I don't know that I'm going off topic. Yeah, people come in and they ask about like the person they want to hear, and like there's a lot of elders that I had recorded, and
you're able to share those recordings with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then not only with like the digitization project that Paul had been working on with like the recordings of elders that that people are interested in, they're also interested in a lot of like the other work that we've been doing, like the Facebook and like the classes that we've been offering as well. We've received quite a bit of interest from people from all over who want to attend our Casca classes. We've got people from like different Casca communities like Kwäch'än. We have a Casca member from California who's connecting with us, and as well like 2 Casca youth from I think Kelowna who are connecting with us as well, and all across the Yukon. So it's nice to see that we're able to provide these like resources for, I guess, like our Casca members, and they want access to like be able to learn their language. So I'm happy that Paul and I and everybody else at the language department are able to provide these necessary resources for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and also how I find out these elders I never heard of before. I would let my Auntie Jocelyn or my grandma Lita to listen, and like, oh, like they would like know the person right off the bat. And it's just really nice seeing like how they hear these voices from like the 60s or the 70s, and they could like understand immediately who was speaking. It's awesome. I really like those moments.
Did you want to mention anything, Martina?
I just wanted to, this is Martina, I work at the language department as well. And I just wanted to mention that some of these digitized recordings, we made little videos out of the ones that are from the Dene Gudeji narratives book. We were trying to figure out a good way to get them out as quickly as possible. So what we did, we scanned the pages of the book, and we made like a kind of an audio book to it. We added the audio file to the slides of the scanned slides of the pages of the book, and created like little videos of those stories. So those we shared on, we have a video, kind of a video stream that we put Casca videos on. So that's one way that we like are now putting stuff out just for anyone to see. We also have, like right now, our main focus has been on digitizing for kind of preservation. That's our focus right now, and trying to work out kind of protocols and procedures about how we're going to be sharing that, because some of them might have some sensitive information that maybe people don't want to go out into the world. So that's still kind of being worked out, but quite a few recordings have already been shared because they've already been public. So there's no, nothing that we need to work out about that because those stories are already published in a book. So I know those have been really popular. People really like that they can hear they can match up the sound with the text that so many people know. People know the text, but the audio files have not been available until pretty recently when we started digitizing. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to it. Oh, one more thing I also wanted to say that we originally had a training through the UBC oral history lab in digitization, and we got a list of equipment to purchase. So it's kind of been driven by that from the beginning, but Paul had gone to Yukon Native Language Center and got additional training there, working with the digitization tech, who I think is listening maybe right now, Tae. So we've been sort of training people more, and now the picture that you see here is actually Paul training Jonathan as he's our new digitization worker. So we're trying to train more people in doing this work because there's a lot of work to do. So just doing it locally and building capacity in the community. And Paul is now able to train people to do it because he's gotten so good at it. So that's exciting.
I wanted to actually ask, and I know you're talking mostly about digitization right now, but I realize COVID-19 has been a significant issue within your communities. Though I was wondering if any of you had ever discussed the possibility of language nests. A language nest is ostensibly what we do is we gather primarily families in an unofficial setting. Like, it's very nice because it's very intimate and non-formal, and it has been found to be very successful in that it actually encourages parents to speak the language with their children. Basically, you gather together every Friday and you ostensibly cook together, or every few days. It's been found to be a very successful strategy, though I do know that's more like a real life kind of consideration. Anyway, I just wanted to put it out there, and that's also been found to be effective.
I remember going to a language nest program or a course. We had it for a week. I was there with Auntie Jocelyn and Sue Caesar-Jules. We went to Carmax and we learned how to create a story and try to figure out how to make that story in the language. And Auntie Jocelyn told a story about a turtle, and we don't have a word for a turtle. So it's just the he, or the animal that carries its house. She made new words and explained how to setting within this little booklet, and we just learned how to create a story. It was a while ago.
You want to say anything, Martina?
Yeah, it is definitely something that we have in our plans, in our strategy plan to work towards. I think the challenge that we are facing is that we still have elders to help us to do this kind of a teaching, but we need younger people to sort of facilitate these activities. We can't expect really, elders to be running after little kids. So that's one of the things we've been trying to do is build a bigger sort of a capacity of having a lot more people learning the language so they can take on these roles. So right now we have two language trainees that are spending a year studying the Kaska language. So we are hoping that we can build on this and just generate more kind of advanced learners in the community so they can take on these roles of for example, running a nest. We've done little sort of events where it was just for an evening or something like that. Or I used to organize one on Saturday mornings. And that was really awesome and really great and got me really excited about the possibility of having that running full time or nearly full time. But at the moment, it's in our minds and we are working towards it, but we don't have that going right now. And yes, COVID has been quite challenging. And we've luckily been able to adapt by like teaching classes online. So we kept working even through COVID and kept meeting together through Zoom and studying language and connecting with elders. So that's kind of saved us. But yeah, it's a challenge right now, but it is definitely in our minds that that's something we need to be working towards for sure.
Interesting. It's always really cool to learn what other other Ungwehue are doing in terms of language learning and revitalization. But Nyama, go well for your answers. That was really very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
So
I think I wanted to address Jennifer's second part of her question, which was about I don't know about difficulties, but the things that we might face when it comes to different dialects from different Kaska communities, and even within our own community because we teach Kaska. So primary elder that a lot of our materials and resources are based off of is Paul's grandma Jules. She was sort of the main elder that what would I call Patrick Moore or Tina? Our linguist? Our linguist, he would work the most with Lita to record verb forms and Kaska, and who he'd mostly learned Kaska from. So that's what a lot of our materials and resources are based off of, which is her dialect, which is I always forget it. Pillai Banks dialect. And so that's the dialect that Paul and I have learned as well. And that is the dialect that we teach in class. But Jocelyn, her dialect is actually Francis Lake, which is different from Lita's. And we don't typically stop to tell someone in class that what they're saying is wrong if their dialect is different. We include it in our materials. We find it just as vital and important as any other dialect, as Lita's. So we record it as well, and we share it with the class, and we encourage them to learn it too. I know that one of my goals is to not just learn the Pillai Banks dialect. It's also to learn all of the other dialects in Kaska, and I would like to learn other First Nations languages in the Yukon because a lot of our ancestors are multilingual, so we may as well continue that practice of multilingualism. Yeah. And then in the future, I guess I want to learn German because my dad's German. And I'm hoping, hey, maybe it won't be so complicated to learn it because I know a whole bunch of different indigenous languages. I can learn German. Yeah, was there any other questions? I don't really see anything else in the chat.
If there are no other questions for Paul and Emeral and Martina, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. This was an incredible presentation and really inspiring with the amount of work that you've been doing. And I especially liked the page with bingo. That was maybe my favorite. That was great. But I just wanted to say congratulations and thank you for all your hard work. This is an incredible project. And thank you for taking the time to talk about your experiences and what you're working on today. So thank you very much. And maybe what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Jenny Liu. She's our host for today. And once again, thank you.
Yes, it's a lot.
We're back. Thank you so much. Talking about adaptability, you guys did great. Herculean strength and confidence for taking over despite the host leaving you hanging. My apologies. But truly wonderful. And you guys did wonderfully in adapting not only to our offhanded fire alarm. There wasn't any real fire, so we're all safe here at the archives. Our records are still safe. But changing over. All right. Still trying to like situate myself and adapt back to being host and steal host abilities back from Caitlin. Thank you, Caitlin, for taking over. I'm so glad you are at home doing Zoom instead of here at the archives. And thank you, Paul and Emeral, for being able to speak past our fire alarms. And I was really looking forward to seeing you. I saw some of your, we were actually outside.
With our little cell phone watching you guys, so we caught at the beginning.
I had
We
my
didn't
cell
miss
phone
it.
out, and I was watching you guys, and trying to give you like reactions and everything. It was kind of funny. The things we experience in life. I see that there's a bunch of lovely shout outs and encouragements, and just I think we all know, but we must say it, that all this work that you do and the courage to put yourself out there to do these sort of interview projects and learning your language is very important. And it's not easy to learn something new, not easy to pick something up, even if it's your own language. I don't know much of my Chinese, and I don't know a lot of my own dialects as well, and it can be difficult to want to speak. It can be embarrassing, and yours can be sometimes feeling a little embarrassed and shy to speak your own language that you feel like you should know. So I do feel that, and I feel like you guys are doing a wonderful job with what you guys do. Yes, so I know that we're on a short amount of time. Our last session was supposed to be a discussion for just an open discussion about how we can do archives, if you got any questions, how we can talk about our roadmap. But because I feel like the fire alarm sort of messed up our time, and I like just not following the rules, that perhaps we can open up the floor instead and talk about more about digitization, archives, have a conversation. And if anybody has any questions about Yukon Council of Archives, they want to know more about what we do, perhaps we can open up the floor. Do we have any questions? You can either raise your hand and unmute, or you can put your questions in the chat. Either way is okay. But if you're okay, I'm just gonna keep on talking till I see a question or somebody wants to say anything. Yeah, I'm so glad that we got Judy Cruikshank to chat with us, and it was a really nice experience to be able to listen to our elders to in sort of opening up the conversation and sharing their stories and what they did when they first started doing interviews way back when, and I love how the follow-up with the youth right afterwards, telling us their stories and their obstacles and difficulties with doing interviews in the current time, with all the new technologies and all the new things that we have to think about now in terms of privacy, confidentiality, access, all the stuff that we know now that we gotta do. And I think it was a great follow-up, and I think our speakers did great in naming their titles. The first one was talking to the kids, and then follow up with
honoring our ancestors, breaking new trails.
Yeah, honoring our ancestors. Thank you. And I think that's really one of the things to think about when we're doing archives. And I know that it is a new concept, but also not a new concept to introduce and implement oral traditions and oral history. We haven't gotten it right, not like all across where there's still lots of improvements that we can make on how we incorporate and preserve oral history and oral traditions. And I think that's one of the things that the Yukon Council of Archives is definitely wanting to improve on and bring awareness to all this good work on trauma-informed archives, all this work on the language, all this work on preserving oral traditions is all related to archives, regardless of what they might, what words they might be used under, whether it's language learning, whether it's oral history recording, whether it's research, whether it's archives, whether it's information management. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has an itching to speak and chat.
We could also keep questions for tomorrow. It is 20 to 3, so we're almost on our.
Yeah, we're 20 to 3. I mean, you guys, I feel like I'll keep the floor open to anybody who wants to chat. Or you guys can leave early. We're pretty chill right now. Oh, I have a message. Grant Tennant, I do a lot of cataloging. I'm curious whether there's a comprehensive list of traditional place names for Yukon that can be accessed. I don't know, do we have
Well, there's the Yukon Geographical Place Names Board.
Yeah.
That has a list of names readily available online. So that would be a good place to start, and probably the people at the Yukon Geographical Place Names Board would probably be the right people to speak to.
Yeah, the Yukon Geographical Place Name Board, and then the Canadian Government Department with that does the geographical place names. They also have a lot of, I know they did a lot of focus on the north and doing place names and mapping for the north. And in proper First Nations. Yeah, they do a lot of renaming traditional place names for First Nations, and few chats. And they have I believe it's an interactive map. And Paul Emeral says the Casca phrase book has many traditional place names. And I know a lot of, I can't list.
YNLC has many books as well that have traditional place names in them. One of them is Daki, has Southern Shawnee place names. And then there would be probably, I'm thinking of Taku River Tlingit First Nation has their map. It's an interactive map with traditional place names in Tlingit that's available on the TRTFN website.
Oh, why don't I bring it up?
So that's for different, maybe not exactly the right answer to the question, but.
Yeah, so the Taku River Tlingit, Taku River Tlingit, if you haven't seen it before, it's a really great project that they did based on place names with GeoLive. And let me just share screen. Do I have ability to share screen? Yes, I do. Yeah, so the TRT geolive.ca has the Atlan map, and it's interactive. And it's, you can like click on their places, and then let's see if there's a.
Sometimes you can listen to the words.
Yeah, some of them have audios attached to the places markings. Just looking for one that might have a audio attached to them that I can show you.
You would have to explore it, but a lot of these have audio.
Yeah, a lot of these have audio. I just can't find them today. I'm usually pretty good at finding the audios, but it is a very useful tool. Let's see if I can.
We can share it out later with some examples, maybe.
Yeah, I'll put them in the chat link. I think it's a really useful project that they did. And I know a few of the other First Nations around Canada have also looked into using maps and changing the place names and then adding audio, whether it's stories, whether it's speaking the language or saying the word, dictations, through this sort of mapping, either through GeoLive, or I know Community Knowledge Keeper is a really popular one. A lot of the old interview books also have elders talking about place names, and most of where these information that gets inputted into the maps come from those oral history recordings and those books, such as like what Julie has made over the years. Those are sort of the archival records and data that gets used. I'll try to play that again. Yeah, so over the years, I believe when Atlin had and their language group did the presentation, they said that they did take old recordings, but they also went out to interview elders and gather new recordings for their place name maps. So that was a really wonderful, interesting project that I think is worth taking a look at. And just stop share right there. Do we have any other?
I added Deki to the
Yeah, the Deki Southern Shoshone place names from the Yukon Native Language Center. And definitely check out the geographic place name board. That's a great resource as well. And of course, all archives. And I think one of the things, if you're looking for traditional place names and stuff, it's really good to go to the communities themselves. There's a lot of recordings that are in the communities that are not out there at the moment and not being used, and just sort of with the community. And it could be for various reasons. It might be restricted in certain ways, or simply might be that nobody was there to process the records. So definitely contact up the heritage departments of, or the archivist at each community, and check them out and ask them if they have any resources. And that's one of the best ways to find place names and do a lot of archival research. Also, one of the things Yukon Council of Archives has to work on, which is help people do outreach and make it easier to do research and find out where all these information lie, and how we can get access to them. Yeah. Do we have any other questions, comments? If not, I will turn it back to our summit slide. Share here. This is what I didn't get to share with you guys because of the fire alarm. And we made this beautiful intro for Emeral and Paul. You get to see it here now. And I'm just going to skip over that. And before we leave, I would like to say that there is a post-summit session on overview of RIM fundamentals. If you go onto our website and the event page, you can access that link to register for the session. It is free, and our instructor, Michelle Baroka, will be hosting that session with us. Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'm very sorry about our last minute fire alarm incident. Reality overtook us. But thank you for staying, and I hope that you will join us for our session tomorrow. It's quite a filled session for day 2. Our topic is on living archival projects. And we have tons of lovely speakers who will be sharing their stories with us and with the rest of the communities. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Yeah, go Anna.
Messages.
Anahla.